Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Wayne McCulloch. Wayne is one of the world's leading customer success experts and a top 100 customer success strategist. Wayne works with Google Cloud's entire SaaS portfolio as a customer success leader. He's a keynote speaker and the recipient of multiple industry awards with more than 25 years of experience in customer-focused roles. Wayne began his software career at PeopleSoft and Vignette before becoming an SVP at Salesforce, the Chief Customer Officer at Kony Inc., and the VP of the Customer Success Group at Looker. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Wayne. Welcome, Wayne.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. So, Wayne, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? We always like to hear from our guests in their own words, a little bit about how they got to where they are today.
Interesting when I look back, because there's no possible way I could have created a plan to get to where I am today, which made me totally rethink how I thought when I was in the early 20s, trying to think about, what's my career going to be? What am I going to do? Where am I going to be? And it really is a journey that hasn't been planned in any way, shape, or form from a long-term perspective, but just made up of a collection of, opportunities that have presented itself. But I got into the world of software for a strange reason. It's because I was working in a sort of more traditional space, and one of my friends got a job in software, and they said it's amazing. They have Pop-Tarts in the fridge, and you can cook up, and it's casual clothes, and it's like flexible work from home. And this is back in the 90s when that was just so foreign to me, working in a more traditional business environment. And so I joined a software company for reasons nothing to do with software, and yet it's become part of my life for the last 25 years. And for me, I started off in the world of education, enablement, adoption of software in the B2B space, and really loved that for 15 years of my career, and then realized that this whole customer experience, customer success movement, especially in the world of software with cloud and the way we can easily download apps and use any product very quickly, which is very unlike software in the 80s and 90s, I realized that was a space I was very interested in, is how to enable people to get success with these investments, with these software applications. And so moved into the world of customer success, and that's where I've been ever since.
Very cool. All right. Sounds good. Thank you for sharing. So, Wayne, you have this new book that was released recently, correct?
Yes. Very exciting / scary.
All right. So it's called The 7 Pillars of Customer Success. So could you share with us what those pillars are, and maybe if you were to pick maybe one or two of those pillars that a business owner or a manager in charge of customer experience or customer success in their business would need to focus on, what would be maybe one or two of those things that you would recommend they focus on, especially in the climate that businesses are currently operating in, just trying to emerge out of a pandemic?
Yeah, obviously a very unique time right now. As an author yourself, I have much more respect for people that write books than I did before I embarked on this journey 3 years ago. I was very motivated. It's similar to when you join a gym, you get really excited, you start working out and getting up early, and then you start missing a couple, and then eventually you just stop going. And writing a book for me was like that. I was so excited, and then I'm like, wow, this is really hard, and it's not what I thought it would be. And but ultimately, we got the book done and launched as the 7 Pillars, and it really was a collection of a lot of experiences. But for me, the 7 Pillars wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was more, how do we create or construct a framework by which we can base our business on how we service our customers? Because there's lots of great books on why customer service and the customer experience is so critical for a customer's success. And there's lots of great books on how to execute that as far as like sort of activities, things you need to be thinking about. But for me, I was missing a framework to pull it all together. I know it's important. I know there's really cool things about creating customer delight and all these other sort of tactical engagement type things. But what I was missing for me to make customers successful was, what's a framework that I can build that can flex with my business as it grows or shrinks, or but can also accommodate a consistent sort of value proposition, a consistent theme, a consistent what I call narrative when I'm speaking to my customers. And so the book for me was about constructing these 7 pillars, which really focused in on 3 main areas. The first one is your company. The second one is your customer. And the third one is sort of the people delivering that experience. And it's funny, I've talked to people and they're like, why do you start with your company? If this is about customer experience and the customer success and servicing that customer, why do you start with your company? And I'm like, well, I have a saying, it's employees, customer success equals employee success, and employee success equals customer success. And it really starts with the employee or employees, and it starts with your organization. You need to build a foundation as a company or as a business that can sustain and deliver a great experience for your customer. So it actually starts with your own organization. And so I developed sort of 10 tools, very specific to the B2B world in software, but certainly applicable as a framework in other contexts, which is, how are you going to run your business at scale, having a consistent voice, having a consistent value proposition into the market. And that's what the first pillar is all about. The next 5 pillars are all about the customer's journey with you as a company. And for me, it starts off, with onboarding a new customer, a new consumer into your business, and how to go do that right. And I actually have a story in the book. It's about a hurdler in the 2016 Olympics, and he was representing Haiti, and he was in the semifinals. I was super pumped because such a small sort of population of people can have someone at the Olympics at the highest level, potentially getting into the gold medal race. And I was watching with great enthusiasm, and unfortunately he tripped over the first hurdle, fell down and didn't qualify. And I feel like, well, that's kind of like customer service. It's kind of like running a business. If you trip over the first hurdle, it's really difficult to recover. It's really difficult to come back. And it doesn't mean you can't finish, and it doesn't mean you can't have some success, but it's really difficult to win. And so for me, onboarding was the first pillar. And then there was the second pillar of the customer journey, which really focused in on the adoption of your product or service. Like, how do we get true adoption? And by adoption, we don't mean just using it, but we mean getting full value from it. How do we do that? The third sort of pillar on the customer journey was really focused in on how do we cement that value proposition in that person's mind. So they've onboarded well, they're using or leveraging the product in some way, and now they're getting maximum value that it can provide, because that leads you to the fourth stage, what I call the fifth pillar, which is around the value expansion. How do we now give that consumer, that customer, more value? How do we create an experience for them even better than what we have done, whether it's through more of the same product or additional products and services? And then finally, a really important one, which I hope we talk about later, is when you mention what the most critical one would be around advocacy. How do we create advocates of our brand, of our products, of our services into the market? Because that is, in this day and age, one of the easiest, fastest, and most scalable ways, certainly the most affordable, in order to attract new business. The final pillar, the seventh pillar, is all about the people delivering on that promise, that value proposition, that great experience. And how do we invest in those people? And I co-created a model with a friend of mine, Shane Anastasi, who also has written a book on the consulting side. And it's called the KSE model, which is knowledge, skills, and experience. And if we think of our people at the front line delivering service, we think of, what knowledge do we give them? What skills can we have them, acquire? And then how do we give them the experience and the feedback in order for them to improve and be better? And so that kind of rounds out the whole book. I guess no one needs to buy the book now. They almost have it all in the podcast.
No, they still need to read. They still need to buy the book and read it for sure. All right. So you started off by talking about onboarding. Does onboarding include the recruitment process, or is that it based on how you wrote the book? Is the recruitment step before, or do you have it all summed up as one with onboarding?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's funny because to answer your question, it's after we've acquired the customer. But in the book, I actually have a secret eighth pillar. And it's funny because I said when I was writing the book, and I was at 345 pages long, which is, pretty big for a business book. And the publisher's like, just get the book published. Like, how much more can you put in there? And I'm like, another 345 pages. There's just so much content. And I said, I actually think there's an eighth pillar potentially. I'm not sold on it yet, but I do believe it exists. And the publisher's like, well, you can't make it 8 pillars if the book's called The 7 Pillars, and all the graphics and all that, all this work had been done around the 7 pillars. But in actual fact, I talk about the fact that, the eighth pillar is pre-boarding. I call it pre-boarding. It's like, getting on a plane. It's called pre-boarding, which is how do we set up the customer for success before they're a customer? And even in this day and age, defining what a customer is different, because you might have a service that you give a free trial. Well, they're not paying for the service, so they're really not a customer of your business from a financial standpoint, but they're consuming the service, so they are a customer. But it's a trial. So this notion of pre-boarding customers, getting them ready to engage with you, is something that I definitely added into the book at the end.
Okay. All right. So one of the things I think is so critical sometimes when we're dealing with customer experience is to get you definitely need to get the right customers, but you also need to get the right people internally. So, there's the internal customer service. How do you ensure that in the recruiting process, right, getting the right people for the organization, it matches back with what you're trying to achieve on an organizational level? That at the end, because one of the things you spoke about was you want these people to become, you want your internal and external customers to become your advocates, your evangelists, your word of mouth advertisers. But, how do you know that the people that you're hiring can actually love the company that they work for so much that they literally walk and speak good things about the company all the time, even when things may not be going so well?
Yeah, look, this is a challenge facing every industry that has, service professionals. And I call them service professionals deliberately. I feel like when people talk about service industry, it's not referred to in a way that I think really highlights the importance that the role that service people play. Mm-hmm. Like it is so incredibly important. And for service professionals, the one thing that in my experience where I've had success is when I hire people, I don't hire for skills. I don't care if you finished high school. I don't care if you have a master's. It doesn't matter to me. In service, that's irrelevant. It does not matter. What matters is empathy. That, to me, that is all that matters. If I can find people that can demonstrate the capability of being empathetic, can show examples of how they're empathetic, then you have a winning service person. And it doesn't matter if you're in a very technical field, if you're in the retail field or whatever, the person has to have that empathy. You can't really teach empathy. It's something that you have. You can amplify it, and you can certainly improve through learning and experience, but ultimately finding people with empathy, because they don't just have empathy for the customer, which is so critical to delivering a great experience. They have empathy for your business. They get it's difficult. They get there are tough times. They get that challenges are going to come that make it necessary to make tough decisions as a company, as a business. And so empathetic people can work through that in a way that allows them to be comfortable and allows them to also, be more appreciative of the environment they're in. And then, other things like communication, sharing, listening, collaborate, all those things that we would want to make sure that we provide as an environment from our people are all important. I'm not saying they're not. But to me, the critical skill is empathy. And there's a great, I worked in a software company called Looker, one of the best companies I've ever worked for culture. And there's probably one other company in my whole life called PeopleSoft in the 90s. They had just amazing culture. And the founder of Looker has this phrase that he uses. When he started the company, he said, great software is an act of empathy. In other words, if you're using software and you can't use it, it's frustrating, you get stuck, it breaks, you are ruining that person's day, potentially impacting their career. Like, it goes beyond creating a great, in this case, application. It's about people being able to do their jobs and be successful. And so great software is an act of empathy. But we sort of built on that and said great service is an act of empathy. That's really what it's about. It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And it's great when things are good. I want to buy something. I've got great experiences, and that's great. And we should celebrate and have and service people with empathy that they lead with can enjoy that and can celebrate and make that a really unique, fun, positive experience for both the consumer and for the service person. But it's also when things are bad is when empathy shines through. Mm-hmm. And it's really, and that comes through in a genuine way. Like we've all been there. We call, I don't want to say the cable company because they always get used, but let's just say we call someone and we get frustrated. We get moved around. Sorry, that's not the right department. I can't help you. And we get that in big companies, and that just means they haven't worked out how to intake the questions appropriately, or you get a chat bot that just keeps asking you 50 questions, and you just get frustrated, right? You're not getting someone who's empathetic, who's saying, look, I get it. Your time is more valuable than ours. Time is all you have. That's really, you can't buy more of it. So every minute you spend trying to solve a problem with us that we've created in your life, a hassle, an issue, a problem, a difficulty, that's on us, not on you, and yet you pay the price as the consumer. And so people who are empathetic can empathize with that. And for me, that creates a different dynamic between people in your company. And then inside your own company, as I said, empathetic people get that sometimes things get tough, and they're going to rally, they're going to support because they genuinely know that you as a business owner or as a company, you believe in that customer centricity. It's not just a moniker. It's not just a mission statement. It's not just something painted on the wall. It's demonstrated by a group of empathetic people trying to make the best experiences possible for their customers. So,
yeah. Brilliant. All right. So, and it's funny that whole characteristic that you have to have as an individual, empathy, it really, as you said, is something that it just cannot be taught. It has to be something that you have from within. And I mean, just on your experience, Wayne, do you feel that as you grow older, especially like as a parent, because I believe empathy is one of those skills that you social skills that you should have, right? Like, just general things like being polite, being courteous. Empathy is something that you should have. It should be a part of your socialization. But what I have found is that because it requires that you tap into your emotional intelligence, at what age do you think persons start to really exercise empathy? Maybe in their teenage years, to just get a better understanding of connecting with other people. Maybe you have a friend who is going through something and you empathize with her. That way, when you actually get into the work environment, you may not, well, I don't think you'd have mastered the skill, but you definitely would have had some exposure to it. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I can be really frank here and say my answer is now different than what it was 5 years ago. Because 5 years ago, I had kids. And so one of the things, I was raised by my grandparents. And so I was brought up in a more traditional environment when it comes to manners, when it comes to morals. We're talking people born, 1920. So the environment I grew up as a child was very polite, and actually in many regards was very empathetic. And so it enabled me to understand the impact that we have on other people when we meet them. And so now that I've had children, I'm like, well, I wasn't born in 1920, and I certainly don't have all the morals and manners my grandparents had. Hopefully I have a lot. Hopefully my grandma would say I still have some, but really when it comes down to it, I think about how do I instill values, and how do I practice empathy with my children when they're in an environment that was very different to mine, where I sort of was able to hone that for me. And it's things like, simple things at Christmas time. is, sponsoring a family that might have, financial difficulties in having and buying presents for their children. And so going shopping with your 5-year-old kid and saying, hey, what would you like for Christmas? And they're like, oh, I'd love this Barbie set. And I'm like, there's people out there that actually don't have this opportunity to pick out a toy. They don't have they're not lucky like we are. They're unlucky. And, that's kind of, does that make you sad that they can't have the fun things you have? And, while I get the comprehension is limited, it's starting to have a conversation and a dialogue with, not everyone is on the same playing field. Not everyone has the same opportunities, and we can make a difference because we can. And so let's pick up a toy. Like, what sort of toy do you think a girl of your age would enjoy? And she might say it's a Tonka truck, or it might be a tennis racket or something. And so we'll go buy it, wrap it, and go give that to a family. And so over time, we look for opportunities to broaden the thinking of our children to, our life, our world, what we have is not the only thing that exists. Because in the world of customer service, you're dealing with people that have lots of different backgrounds and lots of different challenges.
Indeed.
And having an appreciation that we're just one more problem they're having to deal with if they're, frustrated, or one more opportunity to create delight for someone who might not have that. Everyone has that in their life to varying degrees. Some are worse than others. But so in my mind, I think you can start exploring and understanding things like empathy as early as 5, I guess, because that's where I'm starting. I'm not sure if it has an impact. I'll tell you in 15 years' time, I guess. But I do think it's something we can explore with our children, so that as they grow, they can be have a broader understanding of the how other situations people find themselves in. Which in customer service, we touch everybody from all walks of life.
Yeah.
Good and challenging. So anyway,
agreed.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Yes, definitely helpful. And it does cement also, that there is research out there that says you do form your personality by age 5. So it's good that you've started that conversation, because it means then as your kids get older, and you may not be the center of influence in terms of information that you give them, because now they're exposed to the school system, they have teachers, they have friends. By the time they turn teenagers, what their friends said to them is of greater value than what their parents said to them. And so it's good if those core things are built in from early. But let's jump into, what's the one online tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your business?
Well, for me, it's not really directly for my business, but I live in LinkedIn. I'm not a social media person. I'm not on Facebook. I don't have an Instagram account. I'm not a Twitter person. Like that's not for me. We're very private as a family, and we like to keep it that way. But for me, from a professional and a business sense, I find that networking through tools like LinkedIn enables me to connect with people who have similar situations or been on similar journeys. And that's super critical, because one thing I learned writing a book and talking to 50 plus of my peers in the industry is none of us are as smart as all of us. I don't know who said that, but I heard that one time when I was younger, and I'm like, I really get that. Like, we've all faced different challenges and overcome them, and having experiences and have had impacts, and we can all learn from that. And then one thing that I've learned on LinkedIn is by connecting with people and either mentoring or getting mentored by, or just simply saying, hey, I really love your career. I love what you've done. I'd love to grab 30 minutes of your time just to sort of talk about what you've learned, what I've learned. More often than not, people are like, absolutely, like, this is great. Like, I can learn from you, you can learn from me. And learning strategies and concepts and ideas and techniques from other people, for me, is a powerful way to help the business. So I would say something like that, because it's such a unique way to find people with common backgrounds and explore, experiences together, which is cool.
Okay, so LinkedIn is your one tool that you use for your business. Now, Wayne, could you share with us maybe 1 or 2 books that have had the biggest impact on you? It could be a book that you read very long ago, but it still has had a great impact on you. Or it could even be something that you've read recently that you found to be, really insightful or impactful.
Yeah, well, I read my book recently and I thought it was really good. I'm like, I agreed with everything in the book. But seriously, look, there's a lot of great books out there. And in my book, I actually refer to a book from the 80s, really, that talked about moments of truth. And there was a more recent book, I think from Chip Heath and Dan Heath. It was about the power of moments. And one thing for me in understanding a customer journey, which is really all the touch points a customer will have with your brand, whether it's, digital, physical, online, with you present or not, like a website, or the power of those moments are incredible. So there's a book called The Power of Moments, which I think helps to highlight that, when you're trying to create a great experience for a customer, you really have to understand what are the moments that really require that effort, because you could put a lot of effort into a moment that is not as impactful from an advocacy, a loyalty, a delight kind of experience. And so understanding that, I think, is really cool. So I felt like that book was pretty cool. The other one I really liked, which was a recent book, is called Hug Your Haters.
Yes, by Jay Bear.
By Jay Bear, yeah. So, for me, that was a really difficult concept, because in your business, especially if you own your business, like, you love that like you love your children, and that makes you a little irrational sometimes. And so when people complain or get upset, you immediately become defensive, because you know that that's either not true, or this is not fair, or because you're kind of biased. And so, but learning to hug your haters is great. I remember watching, it was an Apple Plus TV show called Ted Lasso, which is an incredibly different show, but wonderful at the same time. And there's a scene where one of the players sort of talks to the coach and basically tells the coach that he doesn't like him, and really, really upset. And the coach sort of, when the player walks away, the coach says to the assistant coach, "Well, he thinks he hates me now. Wait until he loves me." And that phrase for me is like, and later in the show, that player ends up loving him and actually says, "You make it so hard to love you," because he's so frustrated at something. And then he's like, "Did you hear that? He loves me." And that to me is exactly how we view our customers, is when they're upset, like, here's my chance to make them love me. And so that book's great too. There's plenty of others. I can't consume all the books I want to read just for time purposes, but they're the two that have had impacts on me recently.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Could you share with us what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Oh, great question. So, I've just released a book, right, which is very scary, because you're putting out there, this is what I believe, right? This is what I think. This is what I'm suggesting or advising people to do. And that's really scary. And as you write the book, you're often asking yourself, saying, well, do I believe what I'm saying here? Am I saying it because I read it in a book? Am I saying it because I experienced it? Am I saying it because I truly believe it? And so, when you finally put it all down, you send it out in the world. And so what I'm doing now is I'm talking to people who read the book and saying, what's missing? What did I leave out? What did I get wrong? And for me, that's amazing growth opportunity. Like, oh, did I get that wrong? Actually, you're right. I didn't think of it from that point of view. I don't know everything. I know a lot, and I want to share that, but I don't know everything. And so that's what I'm working on right now, is really uncovering the gaps in the book, the gaps in my knowledge, the gaps in my skills. So maybe, who knows, one day I'll do a new edition of the book and add some chapters in, or make some modifications. But really, that's primarily what I'm focused on. And I've just started writing a second book with two other authors. So I'm going to do this with two other people. Hopefully it'll make it easier. And there'll be more information coming out about that end of the year. But it's really about the fourth industrial revolution and how we're going to displace a lot of workers through AI, ML, robots. That's accelerating. And so how can we reskill hundreds of millions of humans on new opportunities in a very coordinated way, which I don't think we're doing as a society right now. So it's a little heavier than the book I just wrote, but it's equally important, I think.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Now, Wayne, our listeners would have listened to this podcast and they're quite intrigued with what you're doing. They're quite intrigued with your journey, and they would like to keep in touch with you. Where can they find you online?
Well, LinkedIn would be a good one. I kind of gave that away earlier, I guess. But but I also have a website. It's called www.cspillars.com. And I'll be building that website out over the next few months. And you can directly contact me through the website. There's an opportunity there just to send me a quick note, and I'm happy to engage. Or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, again, I'm there most days, so I'm happy to answer questions, happy to debate ideas, and also happy to learn from others as well.
All right. Before we wrap our interviews up, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? It kind of helps to get you refocused or get you back on track. Do you have one of those?
Absolutely. To give you a quick background, I went on something called an Outward Bound Standard course, which is basically 28 days in the bush in Australia.
Wow.
And you're just, you're literally, you've got a piece of plastic, you pull your shoelaces out of your shoes every night, put a bit of grass in the corner of the plastic, and you tie your shoelace around and tie that to a log, and that creates a kind of tent. We call it a bivouac over in Australia. And you really live outside for a month with no phone, no electricity, nothing. You were not allowed anything of that. And while I was there, you got one mail drop at sort of day 20. And one of my friends wrote, just literally I opened the letter, and it was one piece of paper with this one phrase on it, nothing else. Didn't have his name, didn't have, hi, I hope all's well, or here's what's happening back up. It was zero. All it had was this phrase, which was, tough times never last, tough people do. And for me, I'm like, that helps me get through when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling like things are going to be difficult. I'm like, it won't last. Like, we get through it. And as long as we get through it, we get stronger, and we continue. So that's something I always think about and refer to in my professional career as well as my personal life.
All right. Tough times never last. Tough people do. Love it. Okay, so we will have that in the show notes of this episode. Well, Wayne, I would like to thank you so very much for taking time out of your very busy day to hop on this podcast and share all of the great insights and nuggets from your book, from experiences that you've had, from persons that you've connected with, just sharing with our audience all of the knowledge that you've gained in a way that they can be able to enhance their own customer experiences and become better at customer success. So thank you so very much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to connecting with some of your listeners.
All right. We just want to remind our listeners they can hop onto Facebook and join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community, and feel free to follow us on Twitter at NavigatingCX. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.